Today on The Eye, we'll explore hot topics with Nashville notables Marilynne Robinson, Elaine Busey, and Dr. Diane Campbell. We'll talk with Meharry's Dr. Gloria Richard-Davis and discuss breast cancer awareness and prevention. And then we'll sit down with celebrities Vanessa Williams and Abdul Salam El-Razak, spotlighted at this year's National Black Theater Festival. Stay tuned, because when you're in the eye, you're in the know. Eye of the Tiger starts when? Starts now. Hello, 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 and welcome to Eye of the Tiger. Before we get started, I want to give our traditional shout-outs. First, to scientists Saul Perlmutter, Brian Schmidt, and Adam Rees for winning the Nobel Peace Prize after discovering the universe is expanding at alarming rates. A shout out to Dr. Bobby Jones, Kix Brooks, and Alan Jackson for being inducted into the Music City Hall of Fame. And a shout out to TSU Forensics team for winning first place in a total of 62 awards at the Berea College Forensics Tournament this past weekend. TSU Forensics is on fire. If you know someone who deserves a shout out, send us a Facebook message at www.facebook.com/Eye of the Tiger TV show. I'm Kimberly Lamarck, your Hot Topics lead, hosting this segment along with Marilynne Robinson, Director of Nashville Minority Business Center, Elaine Busey, Tennessee State University's Faculty Senate Chair, and Dr. Diane Campbell, Professor in Nursing Education at Tennessee State University. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, thanks for carving out the time to be here. Have you ever gone to see a doctor and only seen the nurse?
Yes.
You have?
I have.
How often does that happen to you?
It's pretty rare.
Is it rare?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever gone to see the doctor and only seen the doctor? And there has been no nurse as the first point of contact?
Not that I can recall.
What about you?
Oh, never.
Never?
Ever.
Never. Well, sometimes when I go to see the doctor, I might see just the nurse practitioner who says, well, if there's nothing really wrong with you, you don't necessarily need to see the doctor. But not all doctors are actually doctors. A new group of doctors has taken center stage, but they aren't necessarily medical doctors. Nurses with PhDs are on the rise in the medical field. Over 7,000 nurses earned Doctor of Nursing practice degrees last year, compared to just 170 nurses in 2004. And many want to be called just that, doctor. Nurses argue that if they took the time to attain a doctorate, they have every right to be called a doctor. Doctors argue that this will cause confusion about who's a nurse doctor and who's a doctor doctor. Should nurses with PhDs be able to call themselves doctor? What do you think?
Well, see, that's the perception that nurses with PhDs want to be called doctor is incorrect, because the doctors of nursing practice are called DNPs, okay? So that means that you have a doctorate in nursing practice. Right? PhD is more of a research nurse, okay? Which has always been the title given to someone who teaches at in a university, okay? And when I'm working when I'm in practice, okay, I will say, hello, my name is Diane Campbell. I'm a family nurse practitioner, but I have a doctorate in nursing practice. Because so often patients see the nurse practitioner, it's who's giving them the care.
Right.
And that's the reason why they will call you doctor. It doesn't matter. before, you know, nurses obtain the title Doctor of Nursing Practice, which is a terminal degree in nursing, okay, family nurse practitioners were called doctors with a master's in nursing.
Do they introduce themselves that way? Now, you introduced yourself as Dr. Campbell, but with a doctorate. I mean,
in the university
in
the university setting, I'm Dr. Campbell. In a clinic setting, I would be Diane Campbell. I would, okay, be Diane Campbell, and I would introduce myself and say I have a doctorate in nursing practice, okay, but not necessarily want the patient to call me a doctor.
But you use the word doctorate. You say, I have a doctorate.
I have a doctorate.
Right.
And
which
I
for
think,
the layperson translates to doctor.
A pharmacist is not a doctor.
No.
A dentist is not actually a doctor. So why?
Lawyers.
Lawyers.
They have a doctorate in jurisprudence.
Yeah.
So
Well, that actually, a person who receives the highest academic degree in their field is automatically called doctor. Professors, preachers. But medicine seems to have permanently borrowed this title. Do you think this issue of doctors in the medical profession wanting a restriction on the title has to do with the doctor's ego or money, power, and prestige?
I don't.
I think it's ego, power, and prestige.
Because if it's a
I really
She's
do.
going to throw it all in there.
Yes.
I think it's a little of both, but I think it's also the AMA really liked to hold on to that title. With the nurse practitioners, and now that we're getting doctorates in nursing practice, there's even some that will get the PhDs and still want to be called a doctor in their practice. And it is misleading. But you also have what's called physician's assistants. I'm not sure if you, but they want to be called a doctor, and they just have a bachelor's most of the time, right?
Oh, goodness.
Yes. So, and then the question you asked earlier about, like, when you go to the doctor, do you see a nurse? Most often, now when you go into a doctor's office, you're not going to see a registered nurse. You're going to see a med tech or a
medical assistant,
because they're not actually hiring registered nurses to work in doctors' offices.
Why is that?
Money.
Money.
Yeah. It does come down to money. So if more nurses got doctorates and were able to write prescriptions, let's say they were able to write prescriptions.
That's the thing, is the prescription.
Right. So does that sort of move the doctor out?
Well, nurse practitioners write prescriptions. They have prescriptive authority. They're able to diagnose and treat patients the same as physicians. But the difference is most physicians have a specialty area, okay? Say you go to see the practitioner, and of course, you know, we are bound by our scope of practice. So therefore, if a patient needs to see a cardiologist, which is a specialty, a pediatrician, which is a specialty, we would refer those patients to that physician.
Okay. But using the title itself, if a nurse chose to use the title, because there are some nurses that actually choose to use the title. Do you think it's confusing to the patient?
No, because most nurses would
They would explain it.
Explain to the patient, and patient would definitely know. Because nurse practitioners have a tendency of explaining a lot more to their patients than physicians. So, you know, if they introduce themselves as doctor, or if I introduce myself as Dr. Campbell, I would also tell her that I have a doctorate in nursing practice. In fact, you wear a name tag. And that patient would probably say, well, you know, my doctor has MD behind their, you know, the initials MD behind their name. Why do you have D and P?
Right.
Okay? So it's a matter of
Or
control.
you'll have them that even have PhD and they're a
Right.
nurse practitioner, because a nurse practitioner, that's a master's, that's a specialty. So you'll have nurse practitioners that will have, and sometimes they don't have a doctorate, and they're practicing, and they have the same, almost the exact same privileges as writing prescriptions and diagnosing and treating. There's
What
a
about
little
liabilities
difference.
and exposure? Do they have to have errors and omissions or malpractice
Oh,
insurance?
yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, and now, let me see, you have a DEA, the same as the physician, where you can write prescriptions for narcotics. And you pay just as much as the physician does.
Depending on what practice you're in, like if you're in like women's health, a midwife,
It may be.
those are
So if
a
you
lot
have
more.
all the privileges of a doctor as a nurse practitioner with a doctorate, then why would we really even need to see a doctor unless we need to see a specialist? I mean, just your general illness, I have a cold, I need an antibiotic, just sort of your general illnesses. Is there really a need to go to a physician at that point?
That would be your choice. A lot of people see a nurse practitioner regularly. They don't want to see a doctor.
Would that be a nurse practitioner at the local clinics and at the drugstores? Or would
Not
that
at
be a
the
doctor?
Not necessarily.
Well, you mean like Walgreens?
Yeah.
Those
Talking about
walk-in clinics?
retail
Yes.
clinics, yes.
Those are nurse practitioners.
Yes,
Those are
but in certain areas of the country, especially places like New York, they have nurse practitioner run clinics, whereas the physician is not there and the nurse practitioner owns her own practice. Physician comes in maybe once a month and signs a certain percentage of her charts. In fact, she pays him to do so.
Well, I think there's sort of an uprise from physicians thinking that there's a little bit of a threat with the more nurses actually having a doctorate and wanting the title. Because even in New York, there's a bill that the physicians have put on the table to try to protect the use of the name doctor, you know, or misleading the public in terms of having the terminal degree in medicine. So I think they're feeling like they might eventually feel it in the pocket.
Well, it was actually very difficult in the very beginning when nurse practitioners started getting licensed. AMA tried to stop the privileges that we have now been, you know, given to write prescriptions, treat, diagnose, and to work on our own. What I mean by working on your own, having your own practice. That was a very difficult lobby activity to get that done.
There are 23 states that actually have nurses practitioners without the collaboration of doctors. And most of those states are actually where there is lower percentage of doctors available, so that nurse practitioners are actually functioning as doctors.
And that is actually how nurse practitioners came into play to begin with, because there were not enough physicians in the rural areas and to take care of low-income families, let me say the insured and the uninsured. Most of the time, physicians will turn away that patient that has Medicaid.
Yes, you know, so it does come down to money.
Right.
We have to cut to commercial. But when we return, we'll discuss prescription drugs and the late Michael Jackson in the Conrad Murray trial. Don't go anywhere, because we'll be right back.